Okay, today we have Richard Cutcher, the founder of Captive Intelligence and the Global Captive Podcast. Um, I actually met Richard because I was so interested in the idea of a podcast about captives. I reached out to him and I had the opportunity to join him on his podcast. So it was only fitting that I asked him here. I actually asked Richard for some advice behind the scenes too about what tools to use, how to get started, and you've always been very nice and kind about sharing things for me. So thank you very much. But can I turn it over to you? Tell me a little bit about yourself and your current role with Captive Intelligence.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, and great to be on your podcast. It's good, always pleasure to return the favor. And yeah, you were on the Global Captain podcast. Can't remember the exact episode number. We should probably put that in the show notes. But it is one of those episodes I constantly refer back to, and maybe I'll come on a bit to why about that a bit later. But yeah, so my name's Richard Cutcher. Set up my own company in 2019. Started off as just Global Captive Podcast, and then it since has become Captive Intelligence, and GCP is part of the broader brand. And I've been an insurance journalist for 11 years, or a captive insurance journalist for 11 years, and then for about 5 or 6 years before that, I was a broader journalist, tech journalist, local journalist in my hometown of Reading, and before that had a wacky year as a football mascot, a full-time football mascot as well, which I'm not sure, Anthony, if you ever know about that. So
I
that
did
was a
not know
slight
that.
different. Yeah. So that was I read history at the University of York, and
Okay.
I was getting ready to go to journalism school. I'd applied for a postgraduate journalism course in London, paid my deposit, getting ready to go to that, and then my football club, which is Derby County, was advertising for a new full-time mascot, which is a ram because we're the Rams, and I applied as a joke just so I could get the letterhead back from the club. Everyone wants to have that letterhead from, I don't know what sports teams you're a fan of, but you get that bit of that official documentation from the club. But they offered me an audition, then they offered me an interview, and then an audition in front of an empty stadium, dressed up in the full Ram costume, and I got given the job, offered the job. So I deferred my journalism course by a year and became Rammy the Ram for Derby County for a year. So I was dressed up as a ram for a full year.
That's awesome. I did not know that. And it's not the same, but I know what you mean about getting the for me it was the gear. So
Yeah.
when I was in college, I say this statement as a joke sometimes, but it's 100% true. I played for my university's women's basketball team. I was on the
Okay.
scout team for the women's team. It was one of the coolest experiences ever, but I got to register with the athletes. I got to get all of the gear, and it just said Drexel basketball on it. So if people weren't familiar with it, it looked like I just played on the basketball team. So yeah, I know what it's like to volunteer to do something cool to just to be a part of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think also being a mascot, it's funny because in English, we won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but in English soccer culture, mascots are a bit of a joke, right? Like
Okay.
often it's quite an overweight old guy who's dressed up as a pirate or a ram or whatever it was, and it was always a part-time or voluntary role. But Derby were owned at the time by an American group who owned
Okay.
a group of mostly minor league hockey and baseball teams, I think.
Okay.
And so obviously the American football mascot culture is very different.
Yes.
And I got the opportunity to shadow Benny the Bull when the Bulls came to play Utah Jazz at the O2 Arena in London in one of these kind of NBA show matches on tour. And
Yeah.
I was Benny the Bull's assistant, and he's different level, right? If anyone's seen Benny, he's doing obviously slam dunk
Flips and
shows
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
in the crowd and the silly string, and so he had all these like hand signals that he'd give me, and I'd have to chuck in the stuff. And I think the Americans thought that I could bring that to bring that to Derby, which I didn't. But I brought other parts of controversy to Derby through that role for a year. But it was good fun. It was eye opening. But you kind of, I don't know if you have this feeling, Anthony, but if you're a big sports fan, sometimes you don't want to see behind the curtain.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Sometimes you see how the sausage is being made,
Yeah,
and it kind of maybe, obviously football's a cynical game. All sport is cynical, really, at the top level. And
absolutely.
it probably, although I loved the year and it was eventful and it gave me a whole load of interesting insights and experience. It did definitely kind of dampen my passion for the club for a couple of years after. It's fully back. I now do a Derby County podcast. That's how I got into podcasting.
Nice. What's the
But
name of
for a
it?
couple, Steve Bloomer's Washing,
Okay.
because our legendary player from the 1920s is called Steve Bloomer, and our song is Steve Bloomer's Watching. And lots of kids, when they grow up as Derby fans, mishear that and think it's Steve Bloomer's Washing. And so our podcast is called Steve Bloomer's Washing. But that's how
Awesome.
I got into podcasting. So
That's all.
there was a reason for that story.
That's really cool, actually. So I was gonna, it sounds like you always wanted to do journalism,
Mm.
but how did you get so niche into insurance and captives?
Yeah, kind of by accident. I think that almost anyone that works in captives in any part of captive insurance is probably by accident in
Yeah,
some
that's
in a happy,
I
yeah,
yeah.
very happy accident. I mean, you're not an insurance guy by background, but you obviously have links to captives through your
Yep.
day job, right?
Yep.
Um, So I started off as a local journalist in Reading at the Reading Chronicle and then the Royal Windsor Observer. Um, and I really enjoyed journalism, but at that level, it doesn't pay very well at all. The hours are really long. You have to work really hard. It was good, really good grounding, amazing for training. Like I learned more in those first 2 years at a local paper than I've ever learned since in any job, I would say, in terms of how to write copy, how to write good copy, how to research, how to verify, all the things which I think we'd probably say doesn't happen enough of now, or maybe deliberately so. But so that gave me a great grounding. And really, when you're working as a local news journalist, if you want to have a career and make more money and have like a proper build a home and build a family, you need to look for alternatives. And that could either be just rising up the ranks in local journalism, becoming like maybe the editor of your local paper, which pays better, or going into kind of PR or marketing, communications, or going to the nationals, like national papers. And the national
Sure.
papers definitely intrigued me. I was into politics. I was into that kind of stuff. I was into my sports journalism as well. But again, better money, but still much longer hours, very high stress, not really compensated for how much you're working, and they can be quite a toxic environment from what I understand, or certainly was kind of 15, 20 years ago. And I wasn't really keen on that. So I felt a bit stuck. I didn't want to become a communications person or PR. I saw that as the dark side, as kind of selling out as a journalist. I wanted to be on this side. Um, and a friend of mine was actually living in Nairobi, Kenya, a university friend of mine, and he just launched an online publication called Human IPO, and it was backed by one of the original dot com millionaires from Norway. He'd set up Scandinavia's first online betting platform for sport,
Okay.
and he was investing in East African startups and wanted to set up a media platform which covered the African mobile tech startup space to kind of spread the word to attract more investment, particularly from American investors or European investors. And they were opening a Cape Town office in South Africa to cover the South African side of the African ecosystem because Cape Town was a big tech hub at the time. And my friend Tom, who lucked out, met this guy in a bar, got the job as managing the journalism side of this operation, and he asked if I would open up the Cape Town office. I'd never been to Africa, let alone to South Africa or Cape Town, and I just jumped at the chance because I kind of felt a bit stuck career wise. I didn't know which way to turn, and I'd always liked the idea of living abroad. So
Yeah.
I moved down to Cape Town within about 2 months' notice, and hired a few journalists locally, and got the thing started. And I was there for 18 months, and that was kind of my introduction to B2B journalism, as we say, business to business journalism. So that was then kind of
Like what jump
well, I then
started.
wanted to go back to London, and there was an insurance opportunity. I knew nothing about insurance, nothing about captives, but I'd learned how to kind of, talk the talk when it comes to B2B journalism. At the end of the day, you're just relaying stories. You're doing interviews, you're doing research, and then you're trying to explain that in a really simple way to an audience. And captive insurance was no different when I first started it, right? It was again talking to multiple stakeholders, and putting articles and features together, and all the skills are very transferable. So that via Cape Town was my very unlikely route to becoming a London-based and then New York-based captive insurance journalist, because the role I did at my old company, I was in London, then I was in New York for a couple of years, and then back in London.
And so did you just see and obviously your career trajectory was I don't know what the right word would be, but it doesn't seem so out of the realm that you would be interested
Mm,
in starting your own company because you joined a startup, you've done different things. Um, but what made you think, like, did you just see an opportunity in captive insurance, or was this something that you thought, I may not know a lot about it, but it's super interesting and I want to build on this? Or what made you say, okay, this is what I want to do, and then start
yeah.
your journey there?
So I joined a Captive Review magazine, which was at the time it was the kind of leading publication covering the captive insurance world, and that was my introduction to captives. And definitely those first couple of years, it was purely this is super interesting. I get to travel, I get to go to all these interesting places like Bermuda and
Yeah, the
Cayman and
domiciles, yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
domiciles and even Luxembourg and Malta, right?
Sure.
And I'd go to Singapore once a year, and so I was enjoying the London life. I was really enjoying the topic, but what really appealed to me about the topic and the industry of captives was it was super niche. And although it's a really high value industry and a really important high value part of the commercial insurance industry, so I would say it's the sexiest part of it. Not everyone would agree, but I think it is because it tends to be the biggest clients. You know, it's the Microsofts, it's the DHLs, it's the Lufthansas, it's the BPs. Name any large multinational organization and they have a captive of some sort or more than one. And I like the people. The people are super friendly. It's a cliche, but they are. It's just a very welcoming, super friendly industry or segment of the insurance industry. And so that got me through the first 2 or 3 years of what is yeah, people would see ultimately as a dry topic. I think you could definitely look at it that way as well, but because it's finance. But that got me through those first few years. Obviously, getting a chance to live in New York, but without wanting to probably go into too much detail, the opportunity I saw was that the company that owned that brand was a huge, huge growing, really fast growing media company, but in other areas, not insurance. So
Got
they
it.
were huge in the hedge fund space, huge in e-gaming, huge in other areas and that's where the future of the business was. And the insurance side of it, not so much. You know, it was doing well, but it wasn't doing as well as the other parts, and that's where they were looking to really grow. And I could kind of sense the direction that was going in. So I got offered the opportunity to join AIRMIC, which is the for your listeners who are based in the US in the risk and insurance world. Is the equivalent of RIMS, so it's like the Association of Risk and Insurance Managers for large companies. So I was offered a job there, and I had this idea in the back of my head about launching my own podcast about captives, but I couldn't do it at my current place because that would be competing.
Sure.
Um, so I took the job at AirMic. It was a really good job, research and development job, still in the risk insurance world with a bit of a focus on captives, but not exclusively. And I said, at the beginning, I'd like to start this podcast. It's going to be a side project, a bit of a hobby. I was doing it in my evenings, my lunch breaks, weekends, doing just one episode every 2 weeks, and started launching episodes. We had one sponsor who just put some money behind it so we could buy some equipment. I took some lead to go to some American conferences to interview some American captive people. And when people passed through London, I'd get a hold of them and interview them. And we just got a really good response to that, just purely organic, promoting it on LinkedIn, and the industry was really engaged in it, and that gave me the confidence at the end of 2019 to leave my full-time role at AirMic, which I'm still a consultant for today. I still work with them today, and launch Global Captive Podcast full-time. And I had to get kind of 10, 15 sponsors, and luckily they were already kind of coming to me asking if it was possible kind of by the end of that first year.
That's really cool.
Um, so it kind of I saw the opportunity, and it kind of opened up nicely for me, and I think because I do have a genuine passion and interest for the topic, and I've definitely gained a lot of knowledge on a high level. I'm not a technical expert by any means on captives, but on a high level, I think I know how it all works. I know the pieces of the puzzle, how it fits
Sure.
together, and the trends. I think hosting the podcast, and I was already doing a Derby County football podcast. Hosting the podcast was a really nice channel to kind of get that passion across.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that probably came through.
That's really cool. So what does what would be, and I know you could go at this from a few different routes, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but like I look at it differently as in like you're a founder, so you have to worry about the company itself. I see that you're an editor, and then you're also are running the Global Captive podcast. And so I am always curious from the entrepreneurial side, but I'm curious too about all aspects. But what would like a typical day look like for you? Um, Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I guess the cliche answer, which I imagine lots of entrepreneurs would say, is there is no typical day for an
Yeah,
entrepreneur. Like today, if so, we're talking on a Monday, Memorial Day in the US. It's also a public holiday here in the UK. But my typical Monday, if we were working, would be mostly team catch ups, right? Boring stuff. There's seven. We've got seven of us now. I say it's the boring stuff. It's actually the most important stuff because your team being happy and productive is obviously the most important part of the business. But I'm kind of in that weird phase right now where um, it is a constant battle between getting into the weeds and doing the things that I'm naturally inclined to do and really good at, which is doing the podcast, writing articles, doing interviews, all those things. As a journalist, I built those skills up over the
sure.
last 15 to 20 years, competing against those other really important, valuable tasks, which may be some of the more, from my point of view, more boring stuff. But sorting out payroll, doing the accounts, making sure that our sales team know exactly what they're doing, making sure that our events have got the right. We're kind of in that high growth phase right now. So,
Sure.
to be honest, at the moment, my day is 100 small tasks, rather than probably what I'd prefer to be, which would be three or four meaty, meaningful tasks. I never feel like I've got quite enough time to give to the different parts of the business because now we're not just a podcast, we're a podcast, a content platform, a database platform, an events company, a marketing company. And while keeping up appearances at at all the kind of industry events that we attend and speak at, and have our logo at, and making sure that our brand is front and center. So I'd say right now I haven't got an answer to your question because it feels a bit chaotic, and I'm hoping that maybe if you ask me in 6 months or 12 months time, I might have a better answer. I'm also got twins due any day now, so
Oh
it's
my God.
particularly chaotic.
Congratulations. Yes,
Thank you.
I
Cheers.
have two little ones, and it's the most rewarding thing in the world, but it's crazy.
Yeah,
So,
so you can't see because my background is blurred, but I've got lots of tiny socks and gloves and hats hanging up on the dryer behind my desk. My study's been taken over as a laundry room for all the new baby clothes that's
that's
arrived in the last
awesome.
week.
Enjoy. I know this is another cliche thing, and it when people say it, it honestly I'm like an emotional wreck when it comes to my kids. I don't know why,
Mm,
but like they just know how to tug at the heartstrings and it goes by so fast. It's really easy to get lost in it and to get frustrated, but try to enjoy every second that you can. And I know it's going to
thank
be
you.
particularly difficult for you because you're running your own business, but try w when you can try to enjoy it.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Um, okay, so I lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
No, no, no. That's okay. That's a really cool. I'm happy for you. That's awesome. Um, okay, so are there any aspects of your job that might surprise people?
That's a really tough one. Um, I think probably okay. So from the out, people who know me from the outside, I think sometimes the job that I do, particularly what I do as the face of the company, which I'm trying to move away from, right? Because if you want to build a value in the company long term, it can't just be, the brand can't be
Yeah, it's got
me.
to
The
be
brand's
other
got to
people.
be
Yeah, yeah,
captive intelligence, and that's got to be much bigger than I am. I think we're hopefully on the way there at the moment. But at the moment, I think probably from the outside, if people follow my activity, it looks like I'm in a different jurisdiction every week. I'm speaking at a different event every week. I'm socializing every week. And I think that's probably just a result of good social media managing. As everyone says, what you see on Instagram isn't necessarily the truth, but it's a bit quite the same on LinkedIn nowadays, I'd say. I think my job is it's probably quite a bit more boring than it looks like. Not that I find it boring, but I think in terms of sitting at a desk, calls, doing not this isn't boring, but doing microphone interviews on Zoom or on different podcast platforms. So I think probably the variety of it is probably surprising to people. Um, which goes back to my last point. We're trying to do quite a few different things, obviously all very much related to captive insurance. I probably say the word captives 1,000 times a day, which definitely does. I'm conscious of it, which is strange. It's just there isn't a synonym for captives. There isn't.
no.
So Maybe benefits is the same for you, but it's one of those ones where it's probably the word I've said most of my whole life now, apart from maybe Derby and or other words like that. So yeah, in terms of what's surprising, it probably is actually how much of this time there is, rather than just being out there all the time having fun, because that's tiring.
Yeah, I mean that's basically. I mean, it's good to hear though because it's for other people too. Like from a
Yeah,
learning perspective, right? What you're saying basically is the what you've cultivated and the brand that you're looking to build seems like it's more glamorous, but it's a combination of all of the little things that you're doing and the hard work that you're putting in on the back end.
yeah,
So
absolutely. You said
yeah.
it better than I could.
Um, all right, so then the namesake for this series is If I Knew Then. Um, so this is basically the idea is if I knew then what I knew now, would I approach things differently? Would I give myself like advice for your younger self or for people who are potentially looking to follow in your footsteps, whether it's captive or not? I know one piece of advice, like now that we're talking, you said you refer back to the podcast episode that I was on. I was so nervous to do that. For some reason,
Mm,
I had spoken at conferences before. I really like speaking at conferences because to me, it's always felt very interactive. I've always told people interrupt me with questions whenever you feel like it. For some reason, the second the camera goes on, it feels very permanent. And I get
mm.
so nervous about what I'm going to say. I think I've lightened up a little bit, but that episode listening to, I felt like I was a robot. So but anyway, this isn't about me. I'm curious for you, like advice for your younger self, someone looking to follow in your footsteps, or a quote that motivates you. Because I know it's easy. Sometimes for me, I really like quotes. My friends do, so I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I think probably, I have got a quote that probably sums it up quite well, and it is a football quote from Johan Cruyff, who is a Dutch football legend and European football legend. He kind of founded the modern day Barcelona, and you can tie a lot of modern day football back to Johan Cruyff and his kind of tactical innovations in the 80s and the 90s. But he said, and considering he was a real innovator and considered one of the original football innovators, he said, "Football is a simple game. The hardest thing there is to play simple football." And I think that's so true in business and in the workplace, in the sense that ever a lot of people, when you get your first job, I think it's very intimidating. Whatever, I went into a Derby County's office, right, which I wasn't dressed as a round, I was in a suit. I went into this office and I was surrounded by people who are, 30, 40, 50 years old, and you look at them all like they're experts, and lots of them are experts. But we're all just adults. We're all the same people who have come from somewhere, and we've all got to learn somewhere. And I think nothing is as complicated as it seems. And the quicker you can work out to simplify things and work out that things aren't as intimidating or as complex as you imagine them to be, unless you are doing, I don't know, rocket science, um, then I think things become a lot easier and a lot easier to address. And I think I've kind of learned over the years that actually this job particularly and this industry and the world of business is actually fairly simple. If you can get those fundamentals right, then things can work well quite quickly. Getting them right isn't always easy, but
No,
normally it's the simple solutions that things that make common sense often work out. And I think that I was always quite confident as a young person. I never really lacked in confidence, but I definitely did. I think almost everyone at some point kind of suffers from imposter syndrome
absolutely.
and can feel like they're, how have I got here? And I still have moments now and then when I pinch myself and go, why am I suddenly the guy that's the media insurance expert? Because I'm not an insurance expert in any sense. But I think the quicker you can get over that, and the quicker that you can understand that and understand your place in this environment that you're operating in, and actually things are simple if you just step back and think about them clearly, I think can be really beneficial. So
Yeah,
I
I
don't know if
love
that
that.
quite makes sense, but
No, no, it does. I love that. I mean, sports it's a really good. I use that a lot too as like an example of how you would approach a situation there strategically. It's the same thing. I totally hear you on that. And the idea that most of the time you know what you should be doing, and if you take yourself out of it, personality out of it, it should be simple. And a lot of times you're the one potentially making it more complicated. So I get it. Um, yeah, so thank you for sharing that. All right, so what's next? What's next for you? What's next for Captive Intelligence, for the podcast?
So, so for us, I mean, we're now, as I said, we're 7 people. A year ago, we were 2 people.
That's
Yeah, well,
awesome.
a year ago we were 2 people, and now we're 7 people.
Congrats.
And we probably don't need to grow much bigger than that in the next couple of years. To be honest, there's probably two more key hires we want to make over the next 18 months or maybe sooner. For us, it's really just building because a lot of our business is built now on kind of subscription repeat business. So, the way those business models work is you just got to make sure your renewal rate is solid, 80, 90%, and then make sure you're adding on that new business every year as well while keeping the renewal rate. So the platforms we're building, one of our big products is this database of all the captives in the world, who owns them, who manages them, to some extent, what they're doing, where we can get that information. And so once you're building that and layering on more subscribers and selling that and communicating the value of that, then obviously the value keeps increasing without necessarily having to add on lots and lots of more employees, right? That's the dream. So for us, really, I think the last year and the next year will be quite disruptive in terms of the new hires and getting the processes in place, me finding my role in the company. I go kind of going back to what we discussed before. I'm kind of in the weeds still a lot. And I was having a conversation with a friend from the industry on Thursday night in London, and he's in a similar position. He was like, "You've just got to make sure you're leading. Get out the weeds where you can
Hmm.
and lead. Still be the face, be the strategic guy, give the vision, and get in the weed when you really need to, but ultimately try and stay out of it." So I think one of my biggest challenges the next year is actually finding my role in the company. Obviously it's founder. I'm the leader of it. We've got a business partner. We're equals in the business. He joined last year, and that's been really helpful because he's more of a sales background. But I think I'm definitely that's my big challenge is finding exactly where I can add the most value on a day-to-day basis, apart from being the face of it as well.
Oh, thank you for sharing. So that's
Mm,
it's awesome to hear that your company's growing. Congratulations on your success. Congratulations on the twins coming.
thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. Anything else that you want to share? Um,
No, I will just reference back though the episode you were on. So I did say
okay.
at the start that I mentioned it, and the reason I mention it is because again, coming back to that passion side, as you know, again, I don't know how much of our audience know anything about captives. Let's not bore them too much about it, but um, in our industry, a lot of people are kind of shy or reserved or not allowed to talk about how their companies use captives, why they have captives, which I think is a tragedy because generally there shouldn't be any secret about it. But on the employee benefit side, the side that you come from, and you're not the only one, but you probably are come across the most passionate, the ones I've had on, is there's a pride from the companies that use this strategy, use a captive to help improve the employee benefits and fund the employee benefits, and that then brings back value to the staff. In your case, hundreds of thousands of staff members all around the world. And when you came on the podcast, that was it was clear from the way that you spoke and the way you explained it, how proud you were that your job basically is improving benefits and managing those benefits and doing the best possible. And the captive enables that. And I think, your passion for that, genuine, sincere passion for that, really came across and is actually an amazing selling point for not just captives, but the captive podcast, right? When I go and try and convince other companies to come on the pod, yours is one of the kind of handful that I highlight and say, this is the way you should try and do it if you can, right?
Oh, thank you
Be
very
passionate,
much.
be positive, because I think it helps everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I try not to make this about me and talk about me, but I totally agree with you. I could talk about captives for God knows how long. I am always interested. Like at some point, I think that I want to potentially um, like pursue maybe the other side of captives, So I
Yeah,
because I feel like I know this side very well. But I agree with you. There's always something that you could do to add more value. The idea, yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it, but yes,
yeah,
thank you very much. Yeah, I talk about captives a lot, even that I know I'm the lead for the HR side and the benefit side for our captive. I spend a lot of time educating internally and learning myself as well. Um, but it's an amazing tool. I always think about anytime I network with people and they ask questions about how am I doing this, I'm like, do you have a captive?
Yeah,
So yeah, so I totally agree with you. Um,
cool.
but thank you very much for the time today. I really appreciate it, Richard. This is an awesome conversation. I'll let you go. Thank you for talking to me on a holiday too. I really appreciate it. So
No, my pleasure. A pleasure to return the favor as well. Thanks, Anthony.
thanks. Cheers.